Welcome in to another episode of the My Two Bits Gators Football Podcast, or as tonight, maybe just Gators Podcast, because we will talk some basketball. I'm one of your hosts, Ben, joined as always by your other host, Mr. Randy. Mr. Randy, episode 50. Episode 50. Uh, it seems like just the other day we were recording the first one of these. Pretty excited to be doing this one with you, man. Pretty special little moment here to get number 50 on the books. How you feeling?
I'm feeling great, man. Episode 50. Um, it's amazing to see how far we've come. It's amazing from that first dry run from oh my gosh, all the recording woes and the audio
Oh yeah.
checks and the
Oh
sound
yeah.
discrepancies and from doing this, apart. And but no, man, looking forward to this one. Nice allusion there to including some of the Gator basketball team
Yes,
in
sir.
this pod. Excited to talk about that. Excited to talk about some of the changes. I feel like we got a lot of momentum. So really, really excited for number 50 on my two bits.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Absolutely. Well said. And definitely remembering back to some of those audio difficulties, man. That was fun. But moving right along. Glad those are over, at least for now. Knock wood. So episode 50 of the My Two Bits podcast will include a review of the coaching changes that we have seen so far in this offseason, staff and coaching changes, excuse me. And we will have a bonus of some Gator basketball analysis for you, as promised, as highly demanded, if you will. So hopefully that'll be enjoyable for everybody. So as always, we'll get things started off here with our intro, do our mission, our accuracy disclaimer, our vision, and our agenda. Our mission is always to provide factual analysis of all things Florida Gator football and basketball. Little side note there. Our information will be accurate to the best of our possible ability. We will cite our sources whenever we use them, and all statistical data comes from either ESPN or stats.ncaa.org, unless otherwise noted, and recruiting data comes from on3.com. So our vision is to have unfiltered conversation around the product on the field, as well as recruiting and overall coaching decisions. Our analysis will be based on review of film, and while we will express opinion, that opinion should always be based in some form of fact. We will also evaluate strategy and tactics and discuss our observation of player personnel decisions, as well as on the field/court execution. There we go. So for tonight, our agenda consists of only 3 points, so you'd think this would be a quick pod. We'll see. We're going to first talk about the staff changes in the front office with the hiring of GMs, if you will, GM, assistant GM, whatever we're calling everybody. So we'll run that down. We're then going to talk about the coaching changes that we've had. And for this, with our little prelim discussion, I've focused just on the additions, whereas Randy has also talked about promotions and departing coaches and all that stuff. So he'll get into all that on his part. And then lastly, we will close out with some basketball analysis before we do our wrap up and talk about this team and how successful they've been and how fun they are to watch and why we think that is. Give you some pretty in-depth stats on what we've been seeing and why it's been so effective on the court. So to that end, let's get things started and talk some staff changes. Randy, you want to take that away? Talk about these new GMs. Let's see what we got.
You got it, my man. Folks, we have a new front office, newer front office, whatever you want to call it, right? So Jacob LaFrance, those of you who know that name, he was the director of player personnel when he first got hired on in 2021. Then his role kind of shifted to be that liaison. Then his role shifted again to be like this GM, and he's technically a GM, but Jacob LaFrance, for as good as he is and as good as he's been able to negotiate certain deals with players in the recruiting atmosphere, he needs help. And that's one thing that we can say about Billy. Those of you probably remember the infamous picture, the first team picture with more coaches and staff than players, right? So Billy definitely doubled down when it came to the staff and the infrastructure of this team. So
I think he quadrupled down.
fair, touche.
I think Billy's theme song is "Lean on Me." All right, moving along. Go ahead. I'll
Oh my
stop with the
gosh,
jokes.
yeah,
All right.
yeah, right. No doubt. I mean, well said, well said. So the first addition to the front office, we have Mr. Ben Elsner. In case y'all are scratching your head, we still are as well. No, but
Facts.
Elsner previously worked as the chief of staff for the 33rd team. What is the 33rd team? This is a football analytics website founded by former NFL GM, Dolphins, Jets. Now I guess he's a frequent on ESPN, but former GM Mike Tannenbaum. So Elsner worked closely
Oh,
with the past yet 2 years with former executives, team presidents, gaining insight on successful, sustainable, and efficient team building philosophies. He's an expert in TBP. Okay. So the other thing that's interesting about that is Napier mentioned we're getting the front office built out to be more strategic about the salary cap, the contracts, the rev share, the marketing, the endorsements, and the pool of money that could become available with each of those arenas. So very interesting, right? So
Yes.
chief of staff, he's got some really good information under his belt as far as what he's been able to do at his time at the 33rd team. So that's Ben Elsner. So we also have another addition. B, if you want me to go ahead and start with the other one, or you want to talk about Elsner first?
Um, Go ahead. Go ahead and do Polk, and I'll just do both of them on my side.
Copy that. So now the second edition is going to be Nick Polk. Again, in case you're scratching your heads, we're scratching right along with you. Okay. He's going to serve as the associate athletic director / football GM. Okay. I'll just leave that there.
This is, in other words, this is the one that matters, is what I would read into that personally. But go ahead.
Right. So Polk will oversee the front office for the Gators, responsible for rev share and NIL allocations, student athlete contract negotiations, football budgets, roster management, and work with football personnel. Okay. And Polk's going to work with Elsner on the salary cap, the contracts, but also, this is interesting too, because we're in this age, will also lead the program's efforts in analytics and AI for every financial part of the organization. Polk is best known for his near 20-year tenure with the Atlanta Falcons. So, he's been doing this type of a role for 20 years. Pretty cool. With the Atlanta Falcons, okay, fine, whatever. That I'll just leave that there. Okay. One of the biggest collapses in Super Bowl history. Anyways, during which he helped lead the franchise salary cap management as a director of football operations, right? And also Polk did work with the 33rd team over there with Elsner and Tannenbaum. There's a lot of
Interesting.
familiarity there. Yep, exactly. So, a lot of people, people know Dan Quinn. He was at University of Florida for a while with the Cowboys, with the Falcons, right now the Commanders coach. And, they basically said he's a cornerstone of effective leadership, extensive background with all things football is going to create a winning edge for the Gators. And the other thing that Arthur Blank, the Atlanta Falcons owner and chairman, said he's got a tremendous work ethic, deep expertise in the operations and financial management of a football team, and was someone who was engineered as a strong measure of trust for me and our staff during his time in Atlanta. He's going to be missed. So, Ben, to your point, I think Polk being that role, he's going to oversee a lot more of that. And Elsner is going to come in as the analytics, as the data stuff, but Polk's going to be definitely the point person there. But interesting tandem. They both have industry experience. They both come highly recommended. They're still very young, but at the end of the day, looks like this is the front office that's going to take our Florida Gators to a more NFL style front office when it comes to contracts, negotiate. It's all around the finances, and it's all around how to properly steward those finances. That's what I'm reading into that.
Yeah, I'd say that really, really well covers it, man. You actually took about every point I had. So I'm going to take a different approach here.
Oh, monkey. How about that? Okay.
Yeah, no, really, really nice summary there. Well done. So what I'll do is I'll take a different approach, and let's talk about what we think these guys are actually going to do, right? Because there's a lot of points there. There's a lot of responsibilities there. There's a lot of job titles there, right? As you mentioned.
A lot.
Right. So what are they actually going to do? So what they should do, and what they will do could be different things. We'll find out. We don't know yet. Or at least I don't know yet. I'll put it that way. I looked and looked and looked today and really tried to figure out if I could find out who would have final say on players, right? Who's worth what money, or final say on how much money to pay a player, how much effort to put into retaining a player, right? All of those things, because I think that's a really important piece of this, and meaning who would have final say between Polk and Napier. I don't know. I don't know. Knowing the way that Napier has set this thing up and run this thing so far, you want my guess, you want my bet, it's Napier, because he does tend to have the process is the process, and he runs the process, right? So that's my inclination, but I don't know. I don't know if they'll have equal say. I don't know, and I don't know who breaks the tie if they do, if it goes to Strickland or what. I have no idea. So that was not something that I was able to get a whole lot of detail on. But what I think is important here is, to the point that you made back at the beginning, is we are giving Jacob, and Billy for that matter, help in potentially one of the most important spaces that they need to have help in, right? Both of these guys are very experienced with dealing with front office styles of salary cap management, of player, negotiations, of contract negotiations, as you mentioned, that is potentially on the table now. That is not specified if it's just for the NIL deal itself, or could go beyond that to include deals to try and keep players with UF long term, right? Some of the things we heard rumored about in the House first NCAA settlement. Is it going to include the option to kind of set some parameters around these NIL deals, like rules? Oh, what a concept, right? We have heard suspicion that could happen. We don't know if it's going to at all. If it does, will he be involved with that? I don't know. It's not specific, right? So there's still a lot of unknowns here, but I think the positive takeaway is we have two guys now, really three if you count Jacob, right, that are going to be really spearheading this thing in what's going to become one of the most important. I mean, this is essentially going to end up being your roster management, right? It's even called out in the title, right? So this is going to become a hugely important thing moving forward, especially when we get into rev share and how much of that gets allocated to each player and yada 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 yada, right? There's going to need to be people that know how to do this stuff, right? Revenue sharing is basically a salary cap. It's the same thing that these guys have been dealing with in the NFL, right? Or working with the NFL in the case of Elsner. So ultimately, I think that's what we really want to see as a takeaway here. And I think at the end of the day, I'm happy with this, because we needed to hire a GM. We effectively did. And we even gave him a support staff to go along with it, which I think is great, honestly. Like, I don't think that's a bad thing in this space. I think Billy has made comments about trying to be on the leading cutting edge of this as it comes out. I don't know if we quite did that, but we're certainly giving it a run. So time will tell. We will see what it looks like. We'll see if we get, some more money spent in the spring portal, perhaps, or moving forward into the season, and kind of see what goes on there and how that all works. And we'll address that later too. We have another pod down the road that we're going to take a look back at NIL and some of the changes once House first NCAA does finally go into place, see if we can get some intel on that and all that stuff. So that might give us a little more information on that. But to that end, let's move it along and talk coaching changes. So as I mentioned, Randy and I did this a little differently. He looked at everybody, whether they were going out, got promoted, were coming in. I only have the guys who are coming in here. And to that end, I'm just going to kind of run down their backgrounds, kind of give some of the high points about what I think are good. And for this one, if you want, we can alternate, because it would be a long thing for me to go through all four of these at once. So we can go back and forth, and then you can finish with going through the other, promotions and departures and all that stuff. Sound good?
Yeah, whatever works. Yeah,
we really do make this up on the fly, people. We're not kidding when we say we don't, rehearse this before or practice this before. It's really just, we'll figure it out as we go, and that's how it goes. So anyway, To that end, let's get started. New co-DC and safeties coach Vinny Sunseri. So comes to UF with both NFL and college coaching experience, both with the Patriots, Washington, and then some other teams as well. Obviously, working as an assistant, I believe, at Alabama at one point before he went to the Patriots. He's been very successful in pass coverage defense. So if you look at the stats, Washington was actually ranked top 10 against the pass in 2024. So very, very good with the pass defense with the safeties. Now, I would potentially attribute a little more of the pass coverage to corners than I necessarily would safeties. However, they certainly play a role or can be a hole, as we have seen at times, right?
Oh
So it is
boy.
important and it does matter. However, I don't know that he really has the run defense. Washington did not grade out well in run defense. I don't know how much run defense he's really coached, which is surprising because this guy's a former linebacker, right? So you would think that he would be more equipped to prep them against the run. And maybe it's just something that, he was only there at Washington a year. Maybe it's just something he couldn't get the team to take to in the first season, right? Those things happen. However, I do think that we're better against the run currently with safeties than we are against the pass. I think they're better in that regard overall. So I'll take this higher. I graded these. I gave them a grade for what I thought they were good at. I'm going to call this a B minus. I think it's a good hire. I don't think it's great. The run defense concerns me a little because we do not need to go back to missing tackles in the secondary. We saw what that looked like in 2023, and it did not look good. So overall, like I said, B minus for me. I know you didn't grade him, just something that I did. So that's my take on Sunseri. What do you got there?
I like it. Yeah, co-DC and safeties coach, right? So,
Yep.
folks, he played safety at Alabama. It was what it was, and he was actually his first year playing safety at Alabama. He backed up, and then he came on. He actually had a couple of starting roles, but outside of that, Napier actually had the phone call. Did you read the text as far as the phone call that Napier had with Saban about Cincinnati?
I did not. That is news to me.
It was very interesting. So Saban was quoted as saying he was very impressed with Vinny, has a bright future, and he thinks differently. Impressed, bright
Interesting.
future, thinks differently. So I'll take it, right? He was a two-time national champion under Saban, right? When he wore that uniform, previous coaching experience with the Washington Huskies and the New England Patriots. So you got the Saban coaching tree, you've got the Belichick coaching tree, you've got that there, right? He's obviously familiar with the Origin Blue because if that last name rings a bell, people, his father is Sal Sunseri, who was Florida's D-line coach 2018, 2019. So my main, I don't want to say hesitation, but my main little head scratching is going to be he's only had 1 year of Power Four coaching experience,
Yep.
right? Prior to that, he was running backs coach for the New England Patriots under Belichick. That was what it was, right? And serving as a defensive coaching assistant for the Patriots back in 20 and 21. So, and a graduate assistant under Saban. So outside of that, big role, co-DC, right under Ron, Big Papa Ron calling the plays for the Florida Gators. It's going to be very interesting. You know what? I like your grade. I'll take that grade. I might, if I had to grade it, I did not. But if I had to grade it, I'd probably go one less. But either way, really interesting to see his attitude and how he attacks. Because you look at Armstrong and the attitude he had. You look at Will and the attitude he had, and the personalities they brought when it comes to competition. I'm curious to see his demeanor, his temperament
Yep.
on that sideline.
Yep, for sure. And same with this next guy as well. So Robert Balla, who is the new co-DC and linebackers coach. Are you noticing a trend here with co-DCs? Yeah, exactly. This is
There's a
potentially why
trend.
Will Harris left, by the way. But we'll leave that one alone for now.
Yes.
So new co-DC and linebackers coach Robert Balla comes to UF after spending the past 2 seasons as the linebacker coach for Washington. Once again, if we end up hiring Jed Fish at some point, we'll have to be Washington South instead of like Florida West over there, right? We got to watch it. Just kidding. And Asa Turner there too, right? But anyway, so he was linebacker coach for Washington last year and Alabama the year before. He was not retained by Alabama, but that was also, if you recall, when they had a coaching change. So it's not totally surprising that were to happen. Ironically, he went where DeBoer left from Washington, right? It's kind of funny. So anyway, but ultimately, he has coached several high-performing Power Four players in his 2 years in a role. However, that is all, once again, as you made the point, only 1 year of Power Four experience. Robert Balla only has 2. So once again, we're looking at a little less than an inexperienced coach. And yeah, it's fine. It's middle of the road for me. I gave Sunseri a B minus. I'll give him a C plus. Nothing jumps off the page here for me as being anything exceptional, based on everything that I looked at from like a stats perspective and things of that nature. It's nothing like monumental here. So ultimately, again, middle of the road on this one. So what are your thoughts on Balla?
Yeah, I mean, B, I really can't disagree. Wow, didn't mean to rhyme that. So yeah, co-DC. Here's the theme, right? The Florida Gators, the only team in the nation with 3 co-DCs, right? 3 co-DCs, 2 head coaches. I mean, two DC line
An
coaches.
assistant athletic director and a partridge
Yeah,
in a pear tree.
and a partridge in a pear tree. So outside of that, Bala and Sincere were both non-coordinator assistants at Washington. I thought that was interesting. Yeah, great reference to Fish. I don't know if he is going to be coming here in 27. Whoop, cat out of the bag. No, I'm just kidding.
We'll
Just
see.
kidding.
We'll see.
Exactly. Outside of that, like you said, 2 years of Power 4 experience. He's only coordinated defenses for Southern Utah. Okay, great.
Yep.
Southern Utah, go whatever the mascot is there.
I believe they're the Demon Deacons.
Yeah. Okay. Sure.
That's an old quote. That's an old quote from the WSOP guy that used to say that for every school. I just thought it was funny. Go ahead.
No disrespect, Wake Forest. We apologize.
Indeed, not at all.
At least he was known as a strong recruiter. And the interesting thing is, and this was an article coming out of USA Today, Bala, watch this theme, Bala was bothered that Fish did not at least promote him to co-DC after Ryan Walters and Steve Belichick left Washington this past season.
Interesting.
Yes. Bothered by not getting promoted. Does that ring a bell, B?
Well, it may. We'll definitely touch on that.
Yeah. But yeah, outside of that, I agree with you. If you got him at a C plus, I'll put him right there to C. He's not really proven. You're right. Hopefully, he's got some good energy. If he's known as a strong recruiter, that's awesome. Let's see if that really goes into play because, let's face it, we lost a recruiting beast in Mr. Harris. So a lot on that defensive side, we need that continuation to happen.
Yeah, and a surprising beast in Harris because he was not from this area and yet recruited it quite well. So that was surprising for sure.
Yeah.
All right. So next on the list, speaking of Mr. Harris, his replacement, Mr. Wilson. Darren Wilson, new cornerbacks coach replacing Will Harris, comes to UF, from Arkansas. Wilson has experience with UF previously as an analyst, most recently in, I believe, 2021. And he was, as I mentioned already, the DB coach for the Razorbacks the past 2 years. He led the Razorbacks last season to the 4th best ranking for passing yards allowed. And this is as per FloridaGators.com, by the way. Only allowing 202.8 passing yards per game, despite facing much more talented competition. So I think that's an important call out. Not only did he manage to do that, but the talent on Arkansas's roster, especially in their secondary, does not exactly rival some of their SEC opponents as far as the receiver position goes, right? So the fact that he was able to do that is pretty impressive, to be honest, right? If we really look at it, that's a step up, even maybe above what the ranking shows because of the competition that you played, right? You didn't do this at what was it, Southern Utah? Was that it, right?
There you go.
You did this in the SEC with a team that was not as talented as your opponents and still ranked 4th, better than Florida, by the way. So, got to call this one an upgrade. He's getting a ton of praise. There's a lot of buzz around this hire. And when I say upgrade, I don't know if I mean upgrade from Harris overall. I think some things about him will be better. I think I question some of the things with Harris's pass coverage stuff as far as the techniques and things of that nature go, especially since he was also coaching the safeties to a degree, and we just saw such a terrible performance out of those guys. So overall, I'm gonna give this one. I'm gonna be nice with this one. I'm gonna call it an A-. I think this one is potentially pretty good hire. Especially when you have to consider replacing somebody like a Will Harris, which to that point, if you want to talk to Will during this part, I think that works too. So,
yeah, I can. So here's the people: Darren Wilson, DERO, could be either Darren Wilson or, if you really want to put some swag to it, Deron Wilson.
Deron, baby.
Right. Either way, whatever floats your boat. But the other thing that I like about this hire is the fact that there's familiarity. There's that F word again with the Gators, with Napier. And the other thing, especially when it comes on the DB side, that pass coverage side, as you were mentioning earlier, he comes out of that Corey Raymond tree as well. He worked very closely with Corey Raymond when he was that quality control analyst. Okay, so I think a lot of those things, because remember we were down on Corey as far as, is it his coaching? Has he lost his voice? Why does he not look like the Corey Raymond that was at LSU when he was here at UF? Right? What happened? Was there a drop off? And so the other interesting thing that I think about Wilson, that Napier commented on him, is he's very eager to make his mark. very eager to
Yep.
make his mark. So hopefully he comes in with a lot of gusto there. And that's the other thing too, right? People can speculate all they want. Here's the thing, we don't know. Ben and I do our best when it comes to the
Yep.
analytics, when it comes to the information that we are presenting you. We have heard several things with our respective circles. Why did Will Harris leave? Was he forced out? Was it the whole 10 coaches on the roster, which of course is not a thing anymore? What was it? Was there beef with Ron Roberts? We heard beef with Ron Roberts. We heard, oh, because he wasn't promoted because Sinceri came in. That's what he said.
Yep.
Deuces. Who knows? But at the end of the day, Will Harris is now your safeties coach at Miami.
Yep.
Right, wrong, or indifferent, he gone.
Yep.
So there you go.
No, very accurate, and good points about we really don't fully know why. You said kind of a business is business thing, so it kind of makes me wonder
Yes.
about the promotion thing as being the cause in his comments. But again, it's all speculation. We don't know. We're not there, having those conversations. Frankly, nobody is except the people in the room, right? So
Yes.
unless you're one of them, I don't know how you really truly know. So, all right, to that end, last but not least on this list, certainly not least, at least potentially not least, I'll get into that in a second, is one name that you might be familiar with in Steve Spurrier Jr. So this is a hire that we just made. This is the most recent of these hires. And it is yet another coach returning to Florida, as it was with Darren Wilson. However, after a much longer hiatus, right? So Spurrier Jr. comes most recently from Tulsa, where he served as the offensive coordinator. And even though he will only be listed on staff as an analyst, Napier has specifically stated that they want to hire more coaches to help develop the staff on both sides of the ball, develop players on both sides of the ball, develop scheme on both sides of the ball. He wants more input because he's allowed to have more coaches on the field with a headset, as you mentioned, no longer the 10 rule, right? And he was ahead of the curve on that. Got to give Napier a ton of credit. He got there before they even made the rule. And then he looked like the smart guy in the room, right? So having said that, Spurrier Jr. has worked with a couple decent offensive minds in his career, including his father, obviously, and the late Mike Leach as well, the king of the air raid, right? So some very, very good experience that he would have been exposed to in multiple roles that he's held. And this hire, for me, has at least the potential, emphasis on potential, to make UF's offense, dare I say it, more dynamic.
Oh my.
Gasp, right? But we will have to see if that actually occurs. So my grade for Mr. C. Spurrier Jr. is somewhere between a C+, hold on, to an A+. But it all depends on how he is leveraged in play design and game planning. We know he's not calling plays. We know that's Billy. But if he can make Billy's plays better and he can help him game plan more effectively for those preset play calls, right? Those first 12, 14 calls that are out the gate, can we be significantly better on offense because of that? Because I think the potential exists. This one gives me hope. It gives me hope. It doesn't give me knowledge. It doesn't give me security. It doesn't give me, a guaranteed winner, but it gives me hope that we could actually do something at least somewhat differently in 2025 and actually leverage the tools we have on the field effectively. The potential is now there. It really wasn't before. It is now. I'm happy to say that the potential at least exists. That makes me smile, but it'll make me frown if we don't use it. So there you go. What do you got on Mr. Spurrier Jr. there, bud?
Boy, man, I'm so happy to hear the twinkle in your voice talking about that. That is great.
Yes, sir.
SSJ. All right. So replacing Dan
SSJ.
Enos,
I like it.
right? Replacing Dan Enos by Dan. So sorry, nice guy, offensive analyst. So this is what's pretty cool about this hire in particular, outside of the old ball coach's son. Spurs had a connection with Napier's offensive staff. He was the assistant coach at Arizona in 2004 when the quarterback coach, Ryan O'Hara, so Ryan O'Hara, for those of you who don't know, he's the guy with the headset on. When Mertz and Lagway goes to the bench after their offensive series, that's Ryan O'Hara there, salt and pepper beard in their ear. He's our QB coach. So in Arizona 2004, when Spurrier Jr. is on staff, Ryan O'Hara was his quarterback. Interesting.
Yep.
Interesting.
Very
Right.
interesting.
Love the fact that he's been around. Great call out on the coaching tree. Outside of his dad, Mike Leach, the
Yep.
late great Mike Leach, besides the philosophizer that he was, air raid, absolutely phenomenal. And the thing about Steve Spurrier Jr., what's really interesting here is he didn't follow his dad's footsteps as far as being a quarterback or being, well, a kicker, but he was a wide receiver. Right, he was a
Yep.
wide receiver at Duke. He coached the wide receivers at South Carolina, and so when it comes to that, hopefully there's going to be some integral game planning when it comes to the wide, because we know we talked about it. We have a very dynamic wide receiving core with a lot of talent. So hopefully they are going to get a little bit of that elbow rubbing, shoulder rubbing off of SSJ, and get some good vibes going there to create that dynamic offense that we so need. Because we see all these upgrades on the defensive side of the football. It's hard when you don't see the upgrades on the offensive side of the football.
Ah, man. Well said. Well said.
But yeah, SSJ, excited to see what could be. I like the range there, C plus, A plus. I like it. I agree. I got you.
Nice. Good deal. All right. What else do you have for the coaching section here?
Yeah, outside of that, folks, just a couple quick point outs. David Reese, if that name rings a bell,
Ah, yes. Good call.
yeah, if that name rings a bell, you're going to be so happy, smile to your face. David Reese was kind of like a Jonathan Grenard, was kind of like a Keanu O'Neal. He was a quarterback of our defense from 2017 to 2019, team captain, starter for 3 years, a native of Michigan. He's going to be a defense quality control coach, specifically working with the Edge and Mike Peterson and the Edge room. So that's going to be great. Those of you who
Love
remember
that.
David Reese, a little bit undersized, but boy, was he fierce. Okay. So
Yep.
that's one call there. Love that hire, especially in that role as a quality control coach. So there's David Reese. The next one I'm going to call out is going to be Day1. You're our only hope. No, I'm kidding. Day1 Wilkins. He's going to be a quality control coach now with the safeties. So this is going to fill this spot that was vacant by CJ Wilford, who transitioned to coaching role at Georgia State, where he's going to be on the field at Georgia State this year. So congratulations to CJ. But Day1 recently had a stint with Kentucky Wildcats, where he served as a grad assistant, 24. The Wildcats secondary excelled as they ranked fourth in the SEC, 21st nationally, allowing an average of about 184 passing yards a game, in which Day1 was directly involved as. Before his
See,
tenure in Kentucky, he honed in his coaching skills over at Furman University, oddly enough, the alma mater of Billy Napier.
now you said fourth in the SEC there. So here's where those stat discrepancies come into play. Is it fourth in the SEC or is it fourth nationally?
Oh, yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, I've got here fourth in the SEC, 21st nationally.
See, and FloridaGators.com has your Razorbacks coach Darren Wilson last year
Wilson,
having fourth in the SEC. So who knows, folks? This is what we see. This is what we run into. These are the problems we
unfortunately.
encounter, and it's why we cite our
Mhm.
sources. Because if they're wrong, we cited them. Hey, we did the best we could, right?
We did the
So
best we could,
that
exactly.
just stood out to me when you said it, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So there you go.
Yeah,
So
good
just
call.
yet another example, right? Yet another
Another
example.
example.
Moving
Right.
along. Sorry.
So outside of that, we have coaches that have departed. We already mentioned, right? CJ Wilford, I just mentioned. Dan Enos, right? He's now a QB coach at Wake Forest. Will Harris, he's in Miami. Austin Armstrong, we know our beloved AA DC. Now he's the DC at Houston University calling the plays.
Mm-hmm.
Baya Rasul, if those of you might not be familiar with that name, quality control cornerbacks, now at the Las Vegas Raiders. So he's
Yeah,
going to
got
the
promoted to the
NFL.
pros. So yeah,
Yeah,
very
big,
nice, very
big deal
nice.
there. And B, outside of that, the only other ones I had was close calls was Gerald Chapman. Folks, Gerald Chapman held an interview with the Chicago Bears, and he also held an interview with LSU. And if those of you wondering about the LSU connection, remember he served there under Coach O.
Yeah,
So
and came to us from Tulane, I believe, also, right?
that is correct, and also Tulane, right? But I mean, to turn down the Bears, to turn down LSU. Gerald, it seems like he's found a home here in Gainesville, and we hope he stays here because he's done a great job. Clearly, when you look at this D line and the leaps and bounds that they have made, especially the second half of last season. And the last one is quote unquote promotions section. All I'm going to say is Russ Callaway has been promoted to OC. We know who's calling the plays, but
Yep.
Napier was quoted as saying he was impressed with his preparation and ideas for when he was the co-OC during last fall. And we'll
You know
leave
what?
that.
And it's a point worth making with both Callaway and now Steve Spurrier Jr. being involved in this, right? I know he's not a
Uh-huh.
co-OC, but he's going to be involved. And what we're seeing here is we're seeing an interesting little trend emerge, and that is the two guys that are going to have Napier's ear offensively, if you will, from the looks of it
Yes.
anyway, are both air raid guys, or at least I
The
shouldn't
hope.
say air raid guys, have air raid background. I can't call
Sure.
Spurrier Jr. an air raid guy. Callaway is, but Spurrier Jr. has exposure to it and understands the concepts for sure because of his time with Mike Leach. But I don't know that I could classify him fully as an air raid guy. But nonetheless,
Sure.
they both have that in their background. So do we see some more air raid concepts make their way into the offense? I think that's probably what I would be looking for in terms of play design,
Ooh.
as far as some things that we have not necessarily seen previously. So don't know that we will, but Lagway would be a good quarterback for it. He's got the footwork to do those zero-step drops, right, to do those quick throws, and then also to potentially move the ball down the field with the air raid scheme, right, and the combination of the two that they run there. So interesting caveat there, and probably something we can kind of focus in what we're looking for from a play design thing next season. So thanks for all the extras there. I did not put all those on there, and I should have had David Reese. In fairness, that's on me because he definitely was a hire I should have had. But overall,
Yeah. All good.
I think pretty good rundown there of what we're looking at, what we're going to see as far as upgrades or changes. Maybe not always upgrades, but changes for next season, and
Yeah.
we'll just have to see how it goes. Like you said, we can't know. We don't have the crystal ball, but all we can do is look at the data and go from there. So,
Yes.
any other thoughts on coaching analysis before we move on here, sir?
Again, very interesting. I mean, to have three co-DCs, to have two co-offensive line coaches, to have analysts and support staff. It's just I hopefully they can all communicate and
Yep.
communicate very efficiently because we know
Yep.
what we did not have the first three games of the season on defense last fall. I'll just
Yeah.
leave that there.
Oh, I could argue we didn't have it on offense either.
Hey,
Yeah, exactly. All right. All right. So with that, we will now make our foray here into a basketball analysis. So without further ado, let's get things started. We're going to break this down into a couple different sections here. We're just going to look at why this team is excelling. We're going to look at offense. We're going to look at defense. And then we're going to take some concerns that we have into the tournament upcoming and where we would see maybe some issues, some potential problems. So if you want to look at it from our regular theme, it's going to be a chomp segment, it's going to be a gator bait segment, and it's going to be a visor throw, perhaps. Maybe not quite to the level of visor throw, but just some concerns we have, some things that we think need to be addressed ASAP in order to make this team a little better. So to that end, let's get started with offense. I got a bunch of different things here. This team is fun to watch, right? First and foremost, part of the reason it's good for us to talk about this, Randy and I actually played ball together back in high school. We both have a lot of experience in this particular arena, so we really wanted to take a minute and kind of delve into this and talk about why is this team doing as well as they're doing, right? Well, I think some of the biggest things that stand out from like a statistical standpoint are not the only story, but I actually think in this case they're a big part of it. So that's where I'm going to start off here, and I'm going to start with offensive efficiency. We are currently ranked 7th in the country in offensive efficiency metric as per teamrankings.com. As a side note, which I'll talk more to later, we are one of only 2 teams in the country in the top 12 in both offensive and defensive efficiency as per teamrankings.com. Duke is the other, and they are ranked higher in both metrics, in fairness. However, they also don't play the same quality competition that we do now in the SEC, so that needs to be taken into account. We are also top 10 in field goal shooting percentage in the country, which is pretty equally as impressive when you look at overall, especially when you look at the fact that our 3-point percentage is not so high. So we're making up for that with some very high quality 2-pointers on the interior with that big man play and everything else that we're seeing in the front court. So that's the offensive efficiency piece. I also want to look at scoring. Scoring, this team is very good at scoring, as you might imagine. They're 8th in the nation in points per game, 4th in average scoring margin per game, only 0.1 behind Auburn, who we were above for most of the season, by the way. Most people don't know that, but we were absolutely above Auburn in average scoring margin per game. And we are now just 0.1 below them. It's because the last couple games, obviously, we had a loss in there, and then of course we had the not completely dominant victory over the weekend against Texas A&M, though it was pretty big. So, and this factors in wins and losses for this metric. That's important to note. It's not just the wins. The two teams above us in that metric are Houston and Duke. And what I would argue about both of those teams is the competition level they are playing does not rival what we're playing and what Auburn is playing, right? It's just the SEC is a juggernaut this year. If you haven't been keeping up, the SEC might get 11 teams in the tournament. That is completely possible right now.
Unreal.
That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. 16 teams in the league, 11 might go to the tournament. Are you kidding me? That's wild. So we are really seeing a dominant conference that we're running up against this year in the SEC. So a couple more stats for you. 3-point shooting. We are 23rd. I mentioned the percentage wasn't that high, but we are 23rd in 3-pointers made and 29th in 3-pointers attempted. Thus the percentage not being as high, though it is top 100. And that's worth calling out. Being top 100 in basketball is significant. It means you're better than 2/3 of the rest of the teams in the country, because there are 364, 365, 366, something like that, teams in Division I college basketball. It's not like football. There's only 120. There's literally triple that. So it's really important to call that out and saying that if you are inside the top 100, you don't suck, right? You're not bad. And that's important thing to point out there. Rebounding under Tom Golden has been awesome. Like, it's just been awesome. We are a top 10 rebounding team for several years, and we currently rank 3rd in total rebounding. So total rebounds per game, we are 3rd in the country. This allows for both transition opportunities. It allows for second chance points, right? If they're offensive versus defensive, it just opens up the whole game when you're able to rebound the ball as well as we are, which is just phenomenal. And the last point I'll make for offense before I turn it back over to you is team chemistry. Despite the transfers, because we've had a lot of transfers, right? This team is not all transfers, but it's got a lot of them on there, though several of them have been there for a while now. But nonetheless, they're still transfers. This team plays unselfish basketball, as noted by their assists per game being in the top 40 in the country. That's pretty good. Once again, if it's 360 some odd teams, your top 40, it's almost the top 10%. So pretty impressive stuff. Again, all these stats that I got for all this, by the way, were teamrankings.com for everything I just cited. So that's where I pulled all this information. But offensively, this team, a lot of fun. But I'm actually maybe more excited to talk about the defense when we get there. But I'll let you do your offensive review first. Go ahead, bud.
Nice. I like it, B. I like it. Very good. Very extensive. For the record, I pulled my analytics from NCAA the basketball section. And to your point, correct, there are 355 teams.
Oh, okay. Not 360, 350. My bad.
355 according to NCAAstat.com. So a couple of things I'm going to point out here, and I'm not going to have too much word salad for you, because you hit on a lot of it, which was great. Number 3 in the nation, fast break points, 16.93 per game. Keep the ball flowing and moving. Awesome.
Yep.
Phenomenal. Number 12 in the nation, just under 14 offensive rebounds per game. Number 5 in the nation in scoring margin. 16 point per game spread. A lot of dominant, because when I remember looking at this team, watching the first 10 games going, there's no way they're beating opponents by 22 plus a game. Oh, wow, they are. Okay. Number 9 in scoring offense at 83.8 points per game. B, I think you mentioned that. Another thing that I look at on the offensive side as far as efficiency goes is the assist to turnover ratio. I know John Stockton would be proud. The Gators are number 30th in the nation in assist to turnover ratio at 1.49. Nice. Clean number. Very nice there. Exactly.
Very nice.
Number 62 in the nation with 10.6 turnovers per game. Again, you'd think 62 is high, sort of, but again, with 355 teams,
Top
not
20%.
terrible.
Yep.
Exactly. Exactly. Two things out of the offense, and I'll get this to in my concern section, but I'll just bring it up here because I've got the numbers. Number 139 when it comes to free throw attempts with 20 per game, and then number 210 in free throw percentage at 71.2. So I'll just leave
So
that there for
yeah,
now.
well, we won't leave it there. I'll come back to it later. But I do want to
Oh no,
mention the
sorry, we will.
reasons.
Yes. Yeah,
Yes,
we'll
we
come
will.
back to it.
But what I will say is the reason some of these rankings are different, the numbers are the same, but the rankings are different from one to the other. Well, actually, the numbers aren't necessarily completely the same. Is teamrankings.com does caveat their stats that they only count games against Division One opponents. So from a ranking standpoint, if other teams have played more Division Two opponents, that would influence the rankings. We have played a
There you
couple
go.
Division Two opponents, excuse me, that influences our numbers. So this is part of the reason why there would be a discrepancy in these particular stats. We figured that out when we started looking at it for college football at the end of the season. So just a quick caveat there, again, in the interest of accuracy and trying to always be as transparent as possible with that. That's what we're going for there. So please continue.
No, awesome. Great point. That's all I have on the offensive side of the ball as far as that
All
review.
right. All right, go ahead and roll it over to defense. I'll let you keep rolling. Let's go.
Heyo. All right. So for defensive numbers, I done very similar on the like the offensive side of the football or the basketball. Sorry.
Old
Let's
habits die
go.
hard. Old habits die
Yeah,
hard.
I'm telling you, they do. They do. But let's start off with, I tell you what, one thing that has impressed me about this team is you mentioned earlier rebounding. Number 3 total rebounds per game, 41.9. Wow.
Ridiculous.
Phenomenal job
Ridiculous.
blocking out, getting to the ball, being hungry, being some dogs getting after that ball. So that's phenomenal. Number 49 in the nation, right? As far as defensive scoring, giving up 67.2 points per game. Top 50. Great. Number
Yep.
27 in the nation, blocks per game, 4.8. Well, when you have 7-1, well, let's be honest, Handlogan just came back from that gruesome ankle injury last year.
Which is
But
awesome.
you got Handlogan at 7-1, Condon at 6'10, 6'11, Chinyelu at 6'10 and a quarter, whatever the number. 4.8, awesome. Number 13, when it comes to defensive field goal percentage, holding opponents at 39.4% shooting, making it difficult to shoot to under 40%.
Yeah, that's really good.
That's gonna hum huge results come tournament time. We're almost there. Number 10 in the
Yes, we
nation,
are.
28. Yeah. Number 10 in the nation, 28.1 defensive rebounds per game. Number 60 in the nation at 8.1 steals per game. And then here's the other thing, too. Yeah, we get after the basketball, especially when it comes to boxing out. But number 11 in the nation for rebound margin. So if we're averaging 41.9 per game, opponents are averaging 33.9 per game, a difference of +8. Phenomenal.
Yeah,
That's all I have
stat.
right now. Yeah, on the defensive side of the basketball, B.
All right, fair enough. So throw some more stats out here. So one I'll call out first. That was one of my last ones actually, but I'll call it out now. You had us at 60th in steals per game.
Yes.
So this is super interesting, and this is where you show the strength of schedule. You show and even though our non-conference wasn't great, we still played a more Division One team. So just versus Division One opponents, we are ranked 48th per game in steals per game. Huge jump there. Most of these other numbers are pretty close. That one's massive, so I had to call it out. And then also in blocks per game, I think this was pretty similar to what you had. We were 27th. So biggest thing on the defense here before I go into any more stats. This was the bane of this team's existence for 2 years, right? Under Golden. His first 2 years, we could not get the defense right. Like it was bad. It was bad. And I've got some comparison metrics to talk about here in a little bit. But this has been the reason for this team being at a whole nother level this year. It is all about the defense. This team's offensive efficiency the last 2 seasons under Golden really has been pretty good. It was very good last year. And now this year, we decided to play defense to go along with it. And hey, that's how you get to be a top 5 team for most of the season now, which is pretty remarkable, especially again in this loaded conference. Defensive efficiency, overall look, right? I already mentioned we were one of only 2 teams in the top 12. We were 12th in the nation, so as you might expect there, as per team rankings currently, we were top 10 for most of the season. It's dropped off the last couple of games a little bit, but nothing huge, and I think that has more to do with the other teams maybe having some better games than we did rather than us having necessarily bad games. So, though Georgia was not great defensive efficiency-wise. Moving along.
Yeah.
Biggest improvement on this team by far. Do you want to take a guess at what we ranked in this stat last season?
The defensive efficiency stat?
Yes, sir.
How about in the SEC or in the nation?
Nation.
105th.
216th.
Yikes!
Yeah. 216th to 12th. Slight jump. Little bit of improvement there. I mean, that's a different world. That's a totally different world. You go from being one of the worst defensive efficiency teams that was certainly any good overall to one of the best, and you're still one of the best offensively. Yeah, we'll take that. We'll take that all day. Field goal percentage allowed, you mentioned it. We are 12th in the nation, again, against Division I opponents. I pulled everything from team rankings on mine, so the rankings may differ. But field goal percentage allowed is outstanding compared to last year at 165th. Wow. Whew. The defensive improvement of this team cannot be understated. It really can't. It is a hallmark of Golden teams, ironically. So really, what's more surprising is where we were than where we are. So this is something that Golden absolutely centers in on. Todd is huge on this. He values defense really more than he values offense, though you wouldn't know that from how we perform offensively, but it's the truth. And I think what you've seen is that we got the rebounding part down pretty early. That's a cornerstone of what he does, right? Is the rebounding, and you mentioned it time and time again. I think just some of the on-ball defense and some of the rotations, we didn't have the scheme down those first couple of years, or with the players that we had, right? Some of the transitions, whatever. And now this year, with as much returning talent as we have on this team from last year's team, very, very interesting to see where that improvement has been and how, frankly, shocking it has been versus the prior years. So really good stuff there. As I already mentioned about the blocks and steals, we're top 50 in both, almost top 25 in blocks. Really good stuff. And it just further emphasizes that defensive improvement. So overall, the story, the thing you want to hang your hat on come tournament time, as Randy mentioned, is, yeah, we can score, which that matters in the tournament for sure. You got to be able to score. If you don't, you're Virginia, right? You just control clock and never score, right? You know, Tony Bennett at 101. But having said that, Tony Bennett did win a national title, so defense does matter, right? I'm not saying it doesn't. But ultimately, teams like Houston, I'm never going to pick Houston to make a Final Four. I know they did a couple years ago, but I'm not going to do it this year. And maybe I'm wrong, but I'm not going to pick them because they don't have enough offensive firepower to be able to overcome a team that does play well, even against their excellent defense. And they have an excellent defense, but they're the kind of team that gets upset, whether they're a 1 or a 2 or whatever. They're going to get upset at some point, whether it be, round of 32 or Elite 8. I don't know, but I don't have them in my Final Four. I can tell you right now. They're not in there, no matter what, because I don't trust them to be able to go up against a quality offensive opponent and be able to score enough to keep up. Tennessee, perfect example of this, right? Tennessee was the #1 defensive efficiency team when we played them and hung 73 and a 30-point win on their head. Not that 73 is a huge number, but they were averaging somewhere in the 50s for points allowed when we hung 73 on them. So it is a huge number. And what could they do to keep up with it? Nothing. They could do nothing. I know that flipped when we went there, and that was not a good game for us. However, at the end of the day, the fact that we were capable of doing it is what you want to stand out in the tournament, right? That you can play really well even against a high-efficiency defensive team. And if you're not a high efficiency offensive team as well, then you really run the risk of becoming, again, forgive me if you got Tony Bennett fans on here, but a Virginia. Who I've never thought to be a very good tournament team. And frankly, most of the time they weren't, right? First one to lose to a 16 ever, Virginia. Correct me if I'm wrong. So there you go. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. I believe that's the first time it ever happened. All right. So to that end, let's move on. Let's talk about the tournament. Let's talk about some concerns we have, our little modified visor throw here. You go ahead and get us started off. Tell me your concerns you have going into the tournament. I'll tell you right now, I've only got 3 that really stood out enough for me to call them full-on concerns. But Go ahead, fire away. What you got?
All right. The first one I will say is we are inconsistently consistent with being inconsistent. So what I mean by
That
that
is a
is,
mouthful, buddy. You
yeah,
say that 5 times fast and forget about familiarity.
no, thank you. Touche. So the thing about the consistency is, and I'm gonna segue that into, can we handle success? Because
Ah,
we have to give it our all every single night, afternoon on the court. Period. Now, people are like, well, of course you have to give it your all. Mike White was winless against us
yep,
until last week.
yep, that is
It
correct.
was it was tough to see us start the game so flat and
Yep,
almost lifeless. So there's that. The Missouri game. That's our only loss at the O-Dome this year is Missouri.
yep.
That's it. That and Missouri's had flashes here and there, but from a consistency standpoint, they're not even sure what squad's going to show up on a given night, right? So
Sure.
can we get why? How do we focus? How do we lock down and not be lackadaisical? How do we come out every single game as if we're playing in Auburn on that Saturday? Because I'm telling you, in that kind of environment, that hostile of an environment, to play like, yeah, we were down early, but the fact that we came back and we held pace, we pushed the ball, we out rebounded, we out field goal percentaged, not to mention out fast break pointed Auburn in their
Yeah,
house.
yeah, it was remarkable.
That's right. That's the team that needs to consistently show up. So that's why I say we are consistently inconsistent at being that, right? Can we handle that success? It's a little bit of a head scratcher for me. A little bit of a head scratcher. Because I'll be honest with you, B, I feel like we should have two less losses on. I'm not saying we should be undefeated. We should have two less losses on the season. Right?
Well,
I get
maybe one less because we should have lost to South Carolina because we laid an egg in that game.
You're not wrong, but I look at the Missouri game, I look at the Georgia game as those other two. I get it. We didn't beat. We destroyed Tennessee. They had to get some revenge. Fine. That is what it is. But look at what's happening when you look at consistency, right? North Carolina, the other blue blood, they're not up there this year. Duke is.
Nope.
Kansas, where's Kansas? Not the top 25 people. We've got some really interesting opportunity. Yeah, and the SEC is loaded. We know that. But we've got some interesting opportunities this March. Hopefully we can capitalize on them. The last two things I'll touch on. I don't know what it is. Walter Clayton, as good as he is, sometimes he reminds me of just someone who's very lackadaisical,
Yep.
and sometimes when he's taking the ball up court and it's close game or it's down in the final 2 minutes, he has a tendency to turn the ball over. I don't get it.
Yep.
As skilled
Yep.
as he is, as good as he is, he almost has this nonchalant approach, and I get that from the emotional standpoint. He doesn't get too up, doesn't get too down, but sometimes I don't appreciate, especially when the ball gets lost. There's no hustle, there's no effort. Can Walter really be the leader we need him to be, especially when it comes to taking care of the basketball in a close game at the end of March when we need him to? And the last thing, the lack of free throws coupled with poor free throw percentage. So if we can stroke the three, great. Will Richard, shout out to Will, right just past Al Horford, Joakim Noah, all-time Gator scoring, awesome job there. Past
Yep.
two games, he was on fire. The guy racked up 51 points, 52 points in two games, whatever the number.
Yeah,
But
he's had a couple of great games for sure.
right? I just fear that we get comfortable with the outside shot. We don't work the ball inside. We don't attack the rim, get other teams in foul trouble, get to the line, and really control the possession. So those are my concerns, B.
So I have similar ones. I'd say a
Oh,
lot of these
okay.
are going to align, which probably isn't surprising, really. We tend to agree on these things. So number one, first and
Tend to.
foremost for me, is free throw shooting. So against Division One opponents, again, because this is pulled from team rankings once again, we rank 218th in free throw shooting percentage in the country. I'm just going to let that marinate for a second. 218th. All these great offensive stats, right? All these great things we do. Thank goodness we don't attempt a lot, Randy. Like you said, we don't rank highly in free throw attempts. Thank
Right.
goodness, because we'd lose more games, quite frankly. Bud, like, are you kidding me?
20,
218th. What are we
I'm
doing
telling
out
you,
here? What are we
20,
doing?
20 free throw attempts per game at 71.2%.
I mean,
20 at
it's crap.
71.
It's crap.
It is.
That is absolute garbage. Tempted to reference somebody with that statement, but I'll leave it alone. From
I
our
got
past,
you.
but yeah.
I
All right,
got
so
you.
so it's not good. It's not good. Um, but uh, but simply, first and foremost, it has to get better in the tournament. Period. We will not be able to make a deep tournament run. There will be games where we are going to have to make clutch free throws down the stretch. If we don't do it, we will lose. Period. And I believe I'd have to go back and look, but I believe this is the worst free throw shooting team we've had under Golden. Not that any of them were great, but I believe at least we were mid 70s, high 70s, things of that nature. And again, don't quote me on that, but I believe that to be the case. So I don't know what's going on with this team in free throws. They got a serious bug with being able to not able to hit these things, and it is driving me crazy personally. I mean, it feels like 3/4 of the time we go to the line, we hit half of them. We go 1-1. Like it's nuts. Even with the good shooters, even with the guys that should be making them both, right? We don't. So anyway, moving along. 3-point shooting dependence. So 3-point shooting dependence is something that we really struggled with under Mike White. This was a problem. We were totally dependent on the three offensively. No matter what his scheme did or what his offensive sets did, if you can even call them offensive sets, but if you didn't make threes at a high clip on Mike White's offense, you weren't winning the game. That was one of his biggest downfalls that I identified very early on with those teams. And the teams we had that shot well did well. The teams we had that didn't shoot well did not do well. Period. Simple as that. They were very dependent on the three. We are not nearly as dependent on the three as any of those teams, don't get me wrong. However, I already mentioned that we ranked 23rd in three-pointers made per game. And while it's a good thing overall, it means a bad shooting night could spell trouble if we don't find our offense elsewhere. Now, we are more than capable of doing this, right? You mentioned our front court. They're phenomenal, bunch of 7-footers. Of course, Tyler Hall, who can play inside and outside. Tyler Hawk, excuse me. I always mispronounce his name. Apologies. He is good inside. He is good outside, right? He's just a great all-around player. Condon can shoot at from outside a little bit, though not as well as Hawk. And ultimately, we have got to be able to develop both of those games in the tournament, right? We've got to be a front court and back court team. I know guard play is everything in the tournament, except when it isn't because they can't make shots. And I've seen it happen. I don't care how good your guards are, right? If they're having a bad night, you got to go somewhere else. And we've got to be able to adapt to that and make it work when those nights occur, because there will be at least one or two of them in the tournament. There always are. Teams are going to throw weird stuff at you defensively you haven't seen before, and you've got to be able to do something to combat that. And we can, but the question is, will we? Because I've seen examples where we didn't, right? So that's the thing. We have to adapt that offense, adapt that game plan, make those halftime adjustments. Last but not least, you mentioned it. Turnovers are better this year, down 1.1 per game from last season, by the way, over 1 per game from prior year to 10.6, again, against Division I opponents, which is significant. That's huge. That really matters. However, we still have times. You mentioned Clayton at the end of games. He has a nasty little propensity for it, though I do think that's better this year than it was last year. Certainly last year was a real issue. This year, not as significant. But we have had times where turnovers can become a significant issue, especially with our guards, as I just mentioned. And that can't come boiling to the surface if we want to have success in the tournament. So those are the things that I would look out for. I would definitely watch, what does the free throw shooting look like? Can we make them even in down the stretch? Like, forget the overall percentage. They don't matter as much earlier in the game, but you got to be able to make them when you're up and teams are fouling you to try to get back in the game. And if you can't, you got a problem. You got a problem, right? So what do we do to make sure that works? And then again, 3-point shooting dependence can't be totally dependent on the three. Again, I don't think we are, but we got to be careful because we're kind of flirting with that edge, right? We're right there on the outskirts. And turnovers are better this year, again, but can't become a problem during the tournament. Those three to me are the biggest takeaways of, if those three things are pretty clean come tournament time, you're looking at a Final Four team. Guaranteed. Right now, I will say it. Those three things struggle. Nah, we're out somewhere Sweet 16, maybe even round of 32
Yeah.
if we're not careful.
Yeah.
Probably not with our seating, but Sweet 16 for sure could be a possibility if we mess that up. So that's our takes on basketball, at least to start. We will definitely address this again as we get into the tournament. Our next pod will actually be on March 25th, so it will be after opening weekend. So we may have to throw in a few thoughts there. That pod will be doing a review of whether or not the identity of Florida football has changed. Perhaps we should also do, has the identity of Florida basketball changed or changed back to what it was, right? Or will that identity change in 2025, just as it relates to football? The basketball stuff will be purely tournament based if we give a breakdown on that. And I think we'll probably do a little something on it based on, again, feedback that we've gotten. So to that end, I would say those are pretty much my closing thoughts, other than, thank you to everyone as always for listening. We continue to really enjoy this, and obviously we do, because it's 50 episodes deep, so we must be liking something that we're doing, right? And we hope you guys have liked it as much as we've enjoyed bringing it to you as always. So Randy, any closing thoughts, and sign us off there?
Yeah, B, couldn't have said it better. Happy 50 episodes, Gator Nation. Thank you out there for your support, your feedback. We just really enjoy bringing it to you. And to B's point earlier, this is not rehearsed. This is, hey, here's our topic, here's our agenda. You take your notes, I'll take my notes, and let's just hash it out. And we felt that was the purest way to convey the ideas that we had, and we're thankful for those of you that are enjoying it. And for the record, tell a fellow Gator, let them know about it. We're trying to get as much traction as we can. So really appreciate the input, and that's why B said, "Hey, we got to put basketball in here eventually." And so that's why we did. It was requested by the people, by Gator Nation.
Indeed.
So that's why we put it in there. So,
yes,
to that end, wherever you are, whenever you may be listening, thank you for taking the time, and we will see you around, Gator Nation.